Today's a light day. We're only reading Luke chapter 7, and it's not even like it's that long of a chapter, but there is a lot that's included. The Gospels tell the greatest story ever told. Jesus Christ, God become man who suffered and died to save us. But despite being a cradle Catholic, I've never read them all the way through, and that changes now. Join me as we journey through the life of our Savior, his words, his miracles, and his sacrifice like never before. It starts off with Jesus performing two miracles. Jesus heals a centurion's servant, which is one that we've already read. I think it was in Matthew's, and Jesus raises a widow's son. We've seen something similar with Jairus' daughter, but the context and the events that actually happened were a lot different than this. When he healed Jairus' daughter, there were very few witnesses that saw, and he insisted that they remain quiet. But in this case, his disciples and a great crowd went with him. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. And this report about him spread through the whole of Judea and all the surrounding country. This time there's a lot of witnesses, and he can't keep the word from spreading everywhere. So it seems like in Luke's gospel, he's much more ready to come out to the world, at least at this point in the gospel. Then we get messengers from John the Baptist. We've already read this again, I believe in Matthew, where there was doubt. Are you really the one to come, is what they were asking him. He says, "Go and tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who is not offended by me." It's interesting the way that Luke writes this, because he starts this chapter off with two miracles and then goes into John's doubt and John's messengers, and it ends in a very similar way. "For John the Baptist has come eating no bread and drinking no wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by all her children." So I think this is important for two reasons. One, because even John the Baptist, who has known Jesus since he was born, even he is having doubt at this point, despite everything that they're seeing. And all the people like the religious leaders that disliked John the Baptist and what he was doing, what he was preaching, what he stood for, they're like, this dude doesn't eat or drink. I mean, he's a freak. He has a demon. This guy is not right in the head. And then Jesus comes doing the opposite. He comes eating, he comes clothed, he comes drinking. They call him a glutton and a drunkard. And like I said in that video, the way I perceive this, he's like, I cannot win with you people. And in the last section of chapter 7, we get what feels like a merging of two stories. It's titled "A Sinful Woman Forgiven," where they were actually eating with a Pharisee. And a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair of her head, and kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. Pharisee calls it out. He's like, if you knew who this woman was, if you were who you say you are, then you would never let her touch you like this. So it almost feels like it has callbacks to the woman of Bethlehem that anoints his feet with the really expensive oil. I don't think it's the exact same story. I'm not implying that. But there are a lot of similarities to it. He's really focusing on the outcasts of society, the people who have been cast aside because they're sinners or they're drunks or they're Gentiles, whatever the case may be. But what Jesus responds with is so important when he says, "Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little." And the people at the table with him were a little caught off guard. They said, "Who is this? Who even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." It's about her faith. That's the most important part. And it wasn't just touching him, it was her faith in him that was so clear and so evident, and at this time, so public. That's why he was able to forgive her sins. And that's all for chapter 7. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.